Hello, my name is Moss Nix, and we are going over the fact, or I guess the question, of should schools change start times based on teen sleep needs and habits. Let's just get into it. A little bit of background on this is that the American Academy of Pediatrics issued a policy recommendation back in 2014, this was, stating that school districts should consider pushing start times to 8:30 a.m. or later for older students. The reason for this is the psychological and biological science behind adolescent sleep patterns. Two major factors in these psychological and biological sciences are the homeostatic drive for sleep and the circadian rhythm. And these two go hand in hand, and they are part of the reason that the American Academy of Pediatrics recommended this for schools. When it comes to the homeostatic drive for sleep, that is the tiredness that builds in your body during the day and releases after you sleep or after a good night's rest. This process is weaker during adolescence, and this causes teens to stay up later than they should. The circadian rhythm helps the body determine what time to release melatonin for sleep. See how those two influence each other? It's pretty interesting, I guess. So, this time that the circadian rhythm tells the body to release melatonin is earlier in adults and children. With adolescents, this happens around 11 o'clock to midnight, which is why teenagers have a tendency to stay up so late. And that's also why going to sleep earlier is not an option for most high schoolers because if your brain doesn't release the melatonin you need to sleep, you can't go to bed. Most people believe the science behind why teens need more sleep. But the question is, why hasn't everyone made that change yet? There are two negative outcomes with later start times, and they are busing and transportation and after school activities. And the first one we're going to talk about is busing and transportation. This is the main issue people bring up when we are dealing with later start times in high schools and middle schools. And the lack of bus drivers or the bus driver shortage would cause students to have to wait 20 to 30 minutes after the school ends, which is already pushed back because of the late start time. And they'd have to wait 20 to 30 minutes for their buses to get there. School start times currently are staggered, so like middle, elementary, and high schoolers all start at a different time or at least go for different durations in the day. And the reason for this is so that the same bus drivers can drive a route that will have them dropping off and picking up middle schoolers, elementary schoolers, and high schoolers separately. If you move high school later, there's an issue where you need separate bus drivers to drive those extra routes because the current start time schedules and how they align with the bus routes would not work out if we pushed everything back. And there was a issue where officials in Nashville, Tennessee, estimated that accommodating buses for a later start could cost up to 1.4 million annually, and that is a lot of money, especially to go towards schooling and transportation for school specifically. The second issue is after school activities. This one is interesting because when you push back the start time for high schoolers, extracurricular activities start later and end later. That causes some students to go to bed later than they would with an early start and get less sleep as a result. There were numerous schools that actually shifted back to earlier start times when their after school activities resulted in students getting less sleep than the earlier start times. I thought that was really interesting, and I wanted to make a note of that because if the issue you're trying to fix gets worse, then you should revert back to the original plan, which is what these schools did. There are a lot of positive effects of a late start too, and we're going to look at the start/learn study and see how this shows that if you are able to make the logistics work out of a late start, it does actually show some positive effects for students. So their research question was or they evaluated how educational outcomes changed in the 2 year start following a school start time delay. And their hypothesis is that they expect links between school start times delays and academics performances. Um, they expect this link because getting enough sleep is a key input to the cognitive health, and behavioral factors necessary for educational success. As we know, education is not simply academics, it is every piece of your life can revolve and affect your education. So, the method that they did, kids with a mean age of 15, age was 15 for 2 years. These kids were almost fully 50% male and 50% female, and they were chosen from a cohort of high school students in the Minneapolis St. Paul School District. Um, these students either experienced a delay in start time or a consistently early start time within this 2 year period. They were compared on patterns of late arrivals, absences, behavioral referrals, and grade point average 1 year before and 2 years after the policy change. They gave it a wide range of, I guess, time so that students were able to fully prove if the positive or negative effects on their grade were part of the time change or not. And the results were that they actually found fewer absences tardies and a lower chance of behavioral referral after the 2 years following the new policy. They also saw a zero point 0.7 to 0.17 higher GPA in schools that chose to start later. I think that one is the best part of this because if you consider that in 2 years, somebody's GPA can go up 0.17 or 0.7 in that range, then imagine what that could do for 4 years. If you start high school like this and you end high school like this, I thought that was really interesting because this was only a 2 year study. These are my final thoughts on the Start and Learn study. I think this experiment, in my opinion, implies that when school start times are later, the students can perform better academically. This isn't guaranteed, but it is a possibility. The study proves that students need sufficient sleep to be academically successful, and there's an implication that the student behavior and attendance may improve with a few more minutes of sleep. The results show that teachers and educators may want to advocate for later start times if it's an option for their community. I did that last part because for some communities that might not be an option, or that might not even be the best option. And I wanted to be very impartial on that piece. My final thoughts are that there is physical evidence of an improvement in the GPA of students whose school schedule aligned with their circadian rhythm. It also shows that the connection between other aspects of academics, such as behavioral reports and absences, have a play in, I guess, later start times. And the next thing we're actually going to look at is this video, which talks about the school schedule changes and the impact it has on students.
An American Academy of Pediatrics study claims that middle and high school students should not be in class earlier than 8:30 a.m. to avoid mental and physical health problems.
As 13 News anchor Jack Kane reports, one local school district is putting that study to the test.
Good morning, KC. We are students from Mrs. Paxton and Mrs. Graham's 5th grade class.
The study shows teens who don't get enough sleep are at higher risk of obesity, diabetes, depression, and anxiety. So since last fall, Kanawha County middle and high school students start classes about an hour later. Educators, including Sissonville High School Principal Ron Reedy, see notable improvements.
8:30 start time has worked out very, very well for us. We have greater attendance, less tardies. So all in all, we believe that this is the right step to do it. And it comes down to that. Do we want to do the most convenient thing, or do we want to do what research bears is the right thing?
The later start for older students forced elementary schools to begin classes earlier to accommodate bus schedules. Kanawha City Elementary Principal Kathy Bradley says many families, including hers, had to revise morning routines.
Families situations, if you have a child in all 3 school levels, you may drop them off the first one in elementary, then you make it to middle and high school. That's very convenient for the families, I know. There's also the cons. There's some families that the older kids still have to get up just as early as the little ones because the parent is taking them all together. So it's not ideal for everyone.
Superintendent Dr. Ron During tells us the Board of Education is looking at what's best for most students.
Not all of our LSICs, our local school improvement council meetings, not in, I think, the first couple, but after that we asked a question about that, and most of the people responded positively, saying it was fine, it wasn't much of a change, or at first I didn't like it, but it's worked out better for me now.
Since teachers are reporting an increase in grades and a decrease in tardiness, Dr. During says the schedule is here to stay for now. Reporting in Charleston, I'm Jack Kane, 13 News, working for you.
An American Academy of Pediatrics study.
So that was a really interesting video. I love that one because it really highlights the positive aspects and the negative aspects of doing this late start. And here are my references.